name is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 39 of the Grief of Politics, and I am joined by my co-host, Avin Carroll. Avin, how you doing?
I am doing good. How are
We
you,
just had a
Jason?
big thing right before we started recording about why am I saying... Anyway, I'm in my head about it. It's episode 39 of the Grief of Politics. Avin's
Yep.
joining me once again. We have, we're with the election year, like we mentioned last episode, there's just these things of like, it's not that we don't have topics that we want to talk about. It's just that so much is changing. We want to stay somewhat current for the three people that are listening to this that care about two people that don't destroy each other on a political podcast. We just had
Yeah.
a discussion about it. But yeah, so last episode, last month, we talked about just an overview of the candidates. Now we know for sure that Trump is the presidential nominee on the Republican side. I think Biden is
And Biden.
Biden is
Nope, Biden's confirmed too.
right. I don't think it was set in stone yet last time we talked. I don't remember how many
It
primaries there
wasn't
were.
on
Yeah,
either of them.
right. But now we want to deep dive into both candidates. This episode, this month, we'll be talking about Biden and the good and bad. Biden, his
There's
elect.
good.
Yeah. Right. Well, you know what? Yeah, we're probably going to agree on that in this episode. He's got a lot of problems that he is facing.
Mm.
Even me, myself, who shrugged. I'm just kind of not even shrugging anymore. It's you don't even have the I don't even have the energy to shrug at the guy. So I tried to send you a bunch of articles. You mentioned a couple of them were repeats. I was really trying to find an info on the whole uncommitted thing. I think that's like the
Mm.
biggest issue. So since I seem to be a little bit
I think
more,
there's other issues than the uncommitted
there
thing.
is, but I think for right now, it's probably the most. I mean, because voting is happening. I mean, we just heard in Washington State, the uncommitted got what 30% of the vote. I forgot the tally. It was a big percentage of our
It was like 48,000 primary voters
right
in the Democratic side of the primary voted
here.
uncommitted,
Here,
which
yeah,
was four times what they were looking for.
yep.
And the first article that you sent, they brought up that the uncommitted campaign had only started 20 days before election day, and
In
they still got 48,000 votes
in
uncommitted.
in Michigan, where it kind of originated, I would say, I heard
Mm.
reports that it started 2 weeks before their primary. Usually,
Yeah.
uncommitted in Michigan gets 20,000 votes. They got 100,000 votes in Michigan for two
Yep.
weeks with absolutely no money. They were just calling people and seeing people and having people sign things. And so, I mean, so to just be very broad, Avin, again, since I'm probably more plugged in and reading this than you are, what do you know about the uncommitted vote and what do you think about the uncommitted vote?
So I've read some about it. And like first off, I I applaud people for voting their principles. I've been saying this for years. I typically am a third party voter. The last several elections, I have voted Libertarian um, because I think it is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
I think in the last several elections, we haven't had a good candidate. I applaud Americans having the courage to actually vote their opinion.
yeah.
Um, and I am sick and tired of our media, who is complicit, and our political parties, who are manipulative to press people to vote for one or the other you have to choose, or you're causing the world to collapse
I
and
mean,
babies to die in the street.
yeah, I mean,
The
what,
thing is, in this case,
yeah, go ahead.
uh, the babies dying in the street part is kind of almost true because the uncommitted people are specifically doing this because they are so upset about Biden's support for what's happening in Gaza and Israel.
Mhm.
Um, so you could actually make the case in this case that by voting for Biden, you are voting for babies to die in the street,
Yeah, because I mean,
as
he's,
gruesome as that is, and
and,
as
and,
dark as that is.
and I just want to lay this out. I want to talk about how messed up the situation is because we're obviously giving munitions to Israel and funding. It recently came out, when we do a transaction of weapons, there's a governing body. I don't have their name in front of me, but you have to report the transaction so they can catalog, what's happening with these weapons, where are they going. Well, since the US didn't want to report the sale of the weapons to Israel because they went around Congress, they broke the shipment of weapons up into 100 different transactions. So it was below the threshold that they had to send to this agency. So
Wow.
over 100 times they've sent munitions to Israel in the past few months. And the head of this agency said this is so brazen it's transparent. Uh, with the one
Are we certain that they're all going to Israel? I'm going to guess probably, because like we wouldn't hide our transactions with Ukraine, but
right. Um, I don't want to do a live search. I'll probably put it in the show notes or something. But there's been a lot of talk of this lately. That right there. So here's the deal. So we're doing that to give them weapons. We won't put any conditions on it, even though more people are calling for conditions on it. So then what we do is we build a dock off of Gaza. Well, first we airdrop aid to the Gazans, which isn't enough. But even though there's aid trucks that are parked that need to be inspected, the Israelis will not let them through. They're supposed to let so many aid trucks a day, like 100 a day. They're letting like 50 a day through or something. And 100 isn't even what they need. They need like 200 a day. And so because of that, we decided to drop aid there on planes. So like many people have pointed out, even on the left, Israel is our ally. They're one of our allied states. So the allies that we are paying money to and giving munitions to, we're telling them to let the aid trucks through. They're telling us no, and they're not letting them through. And then because they won't, we decide to do airdrops of goods to Gaza, which is not enough for what they need. And there's been reports that a few of the drops have killed some Palestinians. Because
I've heard of one aid drop had killed one or maybe a couple. I haven't heard of any more than that.
Well, I think it was 1-8. I think it was 1-8, one drop that killed several. Anyway, so we do that. So that's not enough. So then what we decide to do is build a dock off of the coast of Gaza, where now supposedly Biden said no boots on the ground, but someone's going to have to be the supervisor of the shipments coming off the ships. Is it going to be Israel? Are they going to allow us to let aid through? Because to me, this just seems so bureaucratic and ridiculous that this is a thing of like, wait, so this is our solution? You're just going to try to go around Israel? They're our ally. It's like, so what is happening? And for me, hearing Biden's interviews he's been giving about this, where he doesn't want to abandon Israel, but at the same time isn't going to condition any kind of aid or anything. To me, this is like, I think he's too old to be president, but he is doing domestically. I think he did some good things. So before all this, I thought, well, I'm not excited, but I believe in some of the things he's doing are good. So I'm going to keep supporting him. Now, hearing this makes me think that he doesn't have any kind of energy to keep fighting, because if all this is happening and he's able to shrug it all off and go, then it's like, so what's the point? What is happening? Why aren't you, more forceful with this when you've been more forceful with so many things like Ukraine and domestically, whatever you think, he'll say something to Republicans and call them out in speeches. But like the moment it comes to Israel, he kind of is just like, like, I guess they can just keep doing everything that they're doing, So like, it's very frustrating and again, the workarounds to try to get one of our allies to do something, it makes it even seem even more incompetent, where you're like, well, not only are you not tired now, but now you're incompetent, because it's like, well, how many other band-aids can we put on this situation instead of just calling?
Well, I mean, if our if our true position is that the Palestinian people will need to be supported and the combat needs to stop, so much so that we're sending aid around our ally, I think it says that we don't have any control over our ally.
Yeah.
Or at least any influence over our ally. I mean, at the end of the day, I also think it's really like counter thinking that through, right? Like if you pause and actually think it through, not whether or not it's right or wrong, but just we are sending aid to the same people that the munitions that we are selling to them are being used to kill. It's like counterproductive. I think it's relevant too that we bring up in our last podcast where we talked about this. One of the things we talked about, and I was very adamant, right? Like, it doesn't matter if we stop providing aid; Israel's still going to keep fighting,
right?
And then you shared the article with me from the
like Jerusalem Post or Jerusalem something.
Yeah, it was an interview with a general from Israel where he brought up, if the United States stopped providing aid, like, we can't keep this up. Now, I still believe personally that if we stopped giving military aid, Israel would still press the fight to the best of their ability, but it would be dramatically reduced in how much force they could sustain. Um,
Yeah.
Israel has proven that if you come at them, they will hunt you down and they will kill you.
Well,
I think it's worthy worthy to bring up, right, the what happened with the Olympics when their people were taken and
oh,
killed.
Munich in like
Like,
the 70s, I think,
yeah,
or well, but
where
the
like they sent their intelligence officials hunting those people down for years
yeah.
and
Well,
killing them.
the thing that everybody brings up is past presidents. There's been several people that come out that said that Reagan saw that like the Israelis were bombing people in Iran, in Beirut,
Mm.
and he saw the innocent people. Like he was like watching the news, and I guess it's weird that he wouldn't know, but maybe he didn't think to ask. So like obviously you're not going to ask your intelligence apparatus to look into something. If it's like, oh, it's an ally, and then you're watching news, you're like, wait, why are they bombing these people? And I guess he called the prime minister at the time and said, hey, you have to cut it off. And like within an hour, they retreated. And he talked to his war cabinet. He's like, man, I didn't know I could do that. And they're like, well, yeah, you're the president. Bill Clinton got on the phone with, I think, Netanyahu or whoever and did the same. Oh, that's stupid. Bill Clinton got on the, I don't know how to turn that off. He got on the horn with somebody, like he got mad with some prime minister from Israel. And he said, listen, no, I'm going to edit it. But he said, who's the superpower here? You know, he said a lot of other stuff, but he, a lot of other curses, but he basically just said, knock it off, you know? And
Yeah.
even Barack Obama was on the phone with Netanyahu, and something happened. One of the mow the lawn campaigns they were doing in Gaza, and he said, wrap it up. Like, you're done. And they did. So, like, if we have that kind of power and you can make that phone call, I think Biden should at least try to make that phone call and say, hey, you got X amount of days and you're done. You know, we're not going to keep doing this. Or, hey, you've already.
Biden has shown that, at least in this particular conflict, he's not willing to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's tried to press, but he's never gone so far as to be like, you don't want to see what happens when you keep going.
Yeah.
Like, you're done.
Yeah.
But he's not yet put his foot down. Now, maybe publicly he's made a stance like he's trying to.
Well,
but
yeah,
at the end of the day, he hasn't.
Yeah, there's been a lot of articles that are leaked, which is another thing that upsets progressives and just people in general. And this, they talked about it in I think the mayor of Michigan talked about it. You know, he's a whatever. That's where the whole not uncommitted thing started. He said, you know, we've heard so many stories of back channels of Biden being upset with Netanyahu, but again, that was in January. Nothing has changed.
Yeah, nothing's happened.
So you can't. So you can't keep telling us that this is, you know, I'm mad, but I'm not going to do anything about
it. I mean, first off, straight up, if you're anti-Israel, then like, and the majority of people in our country that are opposed to our relationships with Israel, like, are on the left. Like almost all of them. There's very few that are conservative. If you're anti-Zionist, right? Like, you know, I don't necessarily hate Israel, but I don't want us to support them, and we shouldn't be supporting them the way we are. And maybe I'm getting these ideas different. But like, again, you're going to be on the left, because basically everyone that is 100% like pro-Israel, we need to back them, for the most part, is on the right. Biden is already in the minority within his own group of people. Mm-hmm. And so, like, this conflict, our support of it is going to tick off a lot of people. And then you have, was it like, we talked about it before, the Palestinians, Americans, and Muslim Americans that are all typically progressive or Democratic voting are all backing off of Biden too.
Yeah. I mean,
and so much so that you even talked about where like they were being asked in interviews, like, well, you gonna vote for Trump? Like, you gotta vote for Biden or Trump could win, and they're like conflicted.
No, well, the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, I don't know his name. I deeply apologize. I've seen so many interviews with him. I should actually write it down. But he's been giving extensive interviews. You know, people in his community have lost family members in Gaza, and he said, listen, when I was mayor, running to be mayor, I didn't just say, well, the other guy's worse, you need to vote for me. I went out and made the case for you to vote for me.
Right.
So everybody keeps saying, what about Trump? So he said, but the thing is, Biden hasn't shown me why I should vote for him, because what am I supposed to do? Look at the people in my community who have lost dozens of their family members and say, yeah, but the other guy's worse. No. And the thing with the uncommitted is, it's like we're putting you on notice. This is a primary,
Yeah,
right? So it's like,
right.
we're
It's the
letting,
protest vote,
yeah,
and again, like I said before, like I strongly support that protest vote. Now, not continuing to go too far into the discussion of what's happening in Gaza and what's happening
well, we have other,
in Israel.
we have other topics, but yeah, I'm looking at the
We
time.
do, but to not go too far into that particular side of it, right? What he's doing there is just hurting himself, right? Like we talk about Trump, and we'll talk more about him later as a candidate. But we look at the things in the news for Trump hurting himself with his base. A comment he made recently on Social Security and Medicaid,
Yeah.
maybe cutting those.
We'll probably
And,
talk
and
about
it's
that next episode because I find that so fascinating where I'm like, whoa, dude. Like,
or
whoa.
Trump coming out and again, and he's done it more than once, reaffirming Operation Warp Speed
Mhm.
and getting the vaccines out to the people as quickly as he could, right? Like
Yep.
he's hurting himself in that regard. A lot of people have brought up that like most Haley voters, I think like 60% of people that have been supporting Haley or any alternative Republican candidate have basically said, I will not vote for Trump.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so we talk about Trump eroding his base and then possibly losing because he's eroding out the Republican base. But then, here's Biden hollowing out the Democratic base. And right, he didn't need any more help. He was already doing stuff
Yeah,
besides this, but those
yeah.
things could be talked around. They don't affect most people's lives the same way as news coverage of civilians being killed.
I mean, that's what the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan said. And, I've seen many pundits on the left say the same thing. It's like, you lost 100,000 votes to the uncommitted in Dearborn,
Mm-hmm.
Michigan. You won Michigan by 150,000 votes
Mm-hmm.
in 2020. Is it worth, uh, is this gamble worth it? This gamble for Netanyahu, is it worth going through this, for him? Because politically it's hurting you. And, you know, I was thinking about this too, and we always talk, and again, we should like really record those because if we ever have a month out, I mean, it's like an hour conversation, and you're like, I gotta go back to work, and then we talk for another 30 minutes. But the idea is that
Hey, whoa, whoa, whoa. Just to be clear, I don't talk to you during my workday for an hour and a half.
no, 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 no,
Just in
no,
case any of my coworkers are listening
no,
to this,
no, no, no. Yeah,
those are after work conversations. And
yeah,
usually what I'm saying is, I need to go home.
yeah, yeah.
I
I'm,
have a wife who's probably wondering why
yeah.
she hasn't heard from me.
I've punched out for the day, and I'm waiting for traffic to die
Oh, and
down.
there's my thumbs up.
Yeah, you
Fun.
did it. No, but to articulate this point that I just thought about it, it's like, you tell people like, well, what about Trump? And I've heard this even on the left of like,
Mm.
left-wing pundits get so exasperated when, it isn't just Muslim people, it's young people, people of color, like, hey, this is unacceptable. And they're like, but Trump is really bad, And it's like, well, listen, I understand that. And I've seen what happened in January 6th. It is bad. But when you say, hey, this guy's a threat to my democracy, in a way that's almost existential, which is bad. But when you say, hey, this guy is aiding and abetting and people in my community and my friends are dying because of like literally dying and being killed
Mm.
because of his policies, which one is worse? Well, I'm going to say the one that's affecting my family members right now, and
But the reality of it is those voters aren't going to vote for Trump. They're just
no,
not
no,
going to vote.
they've said that we're staying home. We're voting
Yeah.
uncommitted and we're staying home. And there's so many. I mean, I'll bring the article I shared
I
with you.
think I think one of the really important things, though, that we need to recognize in this is, and I'm super grateful, is it's bringing to the surface this problem that we have in the United States, and it's been every election since I've been voting age. Of, but
Excuse me.
if you don't vote for this guy, the other guy's going to win, and everything's going to collapse, and you're going to lose every single one of your rights, and they're going
Right.
to put you in prison and
Yeah.
shoot your parents,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just this catastrophized story, and we as the American people fall for it and repeat the narrative
Right.
over and over and over in every election cycle.
I mean,
The amount of stuff I see about how Republicans are trying to steal your rights and kill you, versus the on the right hand side, like Democrats are trying to make this a communist nation and take your freedoms away, and make every one of your kids gay. Like every
mhm.
single one of those headlines I see is just like, shut up.
Yeah.
We don't
Well,
operate that way. Our system doesn't operate that way. So I'm glad that that what's going on is with two presidential candidates that no one is excited to actually have forward except for minorities in either party that are
Right.
putting them forward.
Well, I just want to bring
Like,
this.
I think
I
I appreciate that it brings up that conversation.
well,
But,
I just want that's fine. I just want to bring up. I did find this NPR article that actually collated
okay.
by Elena Moore. It came out on March 6, 2024.
Okay.
She has a complete tally of the uncommitted votes by state when the ones that have had primaries. I don't think every state has had a primary yet.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah.
But Michigan had 13% of the vote was uncommitted. That's what they're calling it. 13%, 101,436 votes. North Carolina had 13%, so that's 88,000. Massachusetts had 9%, which is 50,000. Colorado had 50,000, that's 9%. Minnesota had 19%, which is 45,000 votes. Alabama had 6%, which is 11,000. That's still nothing to sneeze at. Tennessee is 10,000. Nevada is 7,000. Hawaii, a deeply blue state, I mean, it's got a smaller population. It's 29% of the vote went to uncommitted, and Iowa was 4%. And ours was just reported. Man, I got a thing of the cough.
I feel like it was around 10% of the vote was uncommitted. But look, let's be honest. In Washington State, it's not going to make any difference because Biden's still going to win. In Tennessee, let's just be honest. It's not going to make any difference. Trump's still going to win. Same with Alabama, right? It's those swing states where that really becomes important. Like you brought up Michigan. He only won by 150,000 votes. If 100,000 of them just sit out and don't vote this time around, that could swing the state to Trump. Democrats don't want that, obviously.
How did they do? I'm trying to see because I saw a tally, an actual tally. It says 7%, but that's not right. Was it more? Yeah, more than 48,000 Democratic voters cast a ballot for uncommitted delegates from Washington State. So that's 7.4%, but that's still 48,000 votes. But I mean, Biden, like you said, Biden still won, but 48,000 votes.
And he will win when it comes to the election, assuming that we actually do put forward Biden as the candidate.
Right.
I've said it before. I wouldn't be surprised if the Democrats, now that Trump is the nominee for conservatives, I wouldn't be surprised if Democrats were like, we've convinced Biden to step out and we're going to put this person in his place.
Yeah, I think another thing, I'll say this too, which I think is very funny, is my wife and I voted together. We opened up our mail-in ballots. You and I have talked about it before. It's a great thing. And I said, I'm going to vote. You're going to vote. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I don't even know why I'm looking at the voters pamphlet because, it's a primary. So it was literally like 3 pages. Like, do you want Biden or do you want Trump? And, and they had like Marianne Williamson on there. And the moment my wife opened up the ballot, she said, who's Marianne Williamson? And I started laughing. I said, well, that's a problem for Marianne Williamson. She's only been running for 2 years and been like, I know you and I are plugged in because we're reading the news all the time. But I was like, if someone I said, how many people in this state and nationwide are opening their ballots going, who is Marianne Williamson? Like
far too many people.
So, I mean, I think moving on, well, why don't we go to like domestic stuff? So I have this article that I found. I know you were like, man, why did you send me so many of I was trying to find that last NPR article about the uncommitted. But this one I like is from Politico. It came out. I'm trying to see if there's a date here. 11/23/23, and I did this because that's when everything like switched over with some of these programs. It was written by Garrett Downs, Michael Stratford, and Marsha Brown, and it's just called "Americans Are Losing Benefits That Could Hurt Biden in 2024." It talked about how the WIC programs are being reduced, how millions of student loan borrowers will have to face a resumption of their payments on October 1st. A $24 billion emergency support fund for daycares across the country also ended. So also the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which feeds 40 million low-income Americans, started phasing in this fall, putting hundreds, phasing out, that's a weird sentence, putting hundreds of thousands at risk of losing SNAP benefits, previously known as food stamps. Anti-hunger advocates are warning that if Congress doesn't include another $1 billion with special supplement nutritional program for women, infants, and children, otherwise known as WIC, in the next funding bill, the program may have to start turning away thousands of eligible mothers and babies. And they have a hyperlink to an article about that. So as I think, and another thing that I talked to you about, I think Friday when we were coming up with this, what we were going to talk about was Jerome Powell of the Fed gave a
Mm-hmm.
went in front of there and said, "Why is inflation still high?" And he said, "Insurance, private insurance for homes, mostly homes, but I think cars." He said, it's the premiums are so expensive. That's also driving inflation. And so, I mean, one of the other articles I sent was basically just graphs of like 10 things that Biden, is either doing better or worse on, like 10 metrics to show where Biden's at. I know I've said many times how I feel about graphs and how my eyes glaze over, but some of them were
But
very
data matters.
but data matters, and some of them were very simple where it would just show a line going up and I could understand that. That very simple line go up, line go down. I was like, I see. I totally makes sense. But the idea that I think there was some things he did, like those assistant programs. I think he is freezing student loan payments or, wiping it away or some of it, not all of it, but that will
He's
have,
still working for ways to do that, right?
yeah.
So extremely unpopular in conservative circles for giving the student loan,
Right.
but in progressive liberal circles, right? Like it is linchpin of
Right.
what they want,
Well,
and
also
he's failed to deliver on it
if
so
I
far.
remember right, that was one of his things he ran on, right? So if you're gonna like any
He's
politician,
tried. I mean, he's actually made efforts to do it,
yeah,
but
yeah.
he's failed to do it.
As my old boss said when he was mad at somebody for screwing something up, the guy tried to explain it by saying, "But the guy meant well," and he said, "I meant well," and the supervisor, the plant manager, was like, "But you still broke the thing, so I guess you meaning well didn't mean anything." And then the guy walked out explaining himself, and the plant manager just went to reading his paper, and I was sitting in the office, and he said, "But I guess he meant well." And you could tell he was still mad about the situation. So many progressives are like, "Well, he meant well. He's really trying to get this thing done, but he just can't cross the finish line." It's like,
What ends up happening, of course, in that case in politics, though, is the other side gets blamed, even
right,
if it's not their fault,
right, right,
and then we believe it.
right. I'll say this: you know, uh, it is troubling that happened. I mean, my loans. I don't know if you and I have ever talked about it. Like, I know economically there's these things. I don't know. What do you think personally about that kind of stuff? Like, economically, obviously, conservatives are like, I think the one problem I have the argument with is like, well, I had to do it, so you have to do it thing of like, I paid my loans, so you have to pay your loans.
I do think it's not fair to people who actually did pay off their loans, right? Like, are we going to go back and refund those other people who did it too? How far back do we go? What's fair? What's
I
not?
mean, I disagree.
Obviously, we wouldn't do that, but they had to go through the economic burdens and the struggles and the challenges of that.
I disagree with that argument, but go ahead.
I, you think it is fair to them? Like they had to pay off all their loans.
I mean, I did.
Maybe
I
you
paid.
did.
I paid off my loans.
What is it? Is it fair to you though that they're not going to reimburse you for it?
I mean, I don't.
This is the same thing to me, Joe, as the struggle we have with raising the minimum wage, right? So, and before you protest, just hear me out. There's the problem that you have where like, cool, we raised the minimum wage in Washington. I think it's up to like 15 something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool, we raised the minimum wage. This brand new person who's been with the company for a month automatically gets a raise from $14 to $15 because minimum wage went up. But someone who'd been there for a couple of years and had earned a couple of raises already, who was already at 15, well, they don't get a raise.
I mean, that happened.
So
That happened to me.
it doesn't feel fair. Now, is it fair or not? Hey, you're making 15, they're making 15. But right, like if you're the guy who had worked there for a couple of years, gotten some raises, and had raised yourself up, it does feel like you're getting ripped off because your life doesn't improve, but theirs does. Does that mean you don't want them to improve? No, it means you also want to improve yourself. And so it's the same thing with student loan forgiveness, right? Like you paid off your loans, you struggled. We've been friends for over, gosh, close to 30 years. I mean, we're coming up there.
Oh no! Oh no!
I know, right?
We're gonna. I mean, we don't drink that much
closer
anymore.
to 30 than 20.
We don't drink that much anymore. But we might have to just sit across the table from each other and drink a hard liquor or something, and just a sip of something. It'd just be like
right.
30 years.
So
30 years.
That's where I'm going to, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not something that should be done from that position, but definitely, like anyone else is going to feel like I'm getting screwed here. Like I paid all of my debt. The other problem I have with it, and this is the bigger problem for me personally, is you signed a contract. Now, you make the argument that these loans are predatory, but I promise you, all of them were not predatory. In fact, the vast majority of them, everything was presented correctly, and people still moved forward with it, saying, I will pay off this debt. I promise I will. And they probably all had the intention to do so, the majority of them. In the cases where it's predatory, heck yeah, relieve that debt. Go after the lender for being a predatory lender. Make them pay for it. It shouldn't be coming out of the taxpayers' dollars. But the other end of it is like, you signed a contract. File bankruptcy. Now, we can't file bankruptcy on student loan debt, and that is another place that we have a problem.
Yeah.
Because I promise you the banks would get a lot more tight about lending that money if it wasn't protected.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I'll say this, like, to not to, hey, that's why we do this. We're not destroying each other. I haven't
destroyed you.
He destroyed me. I don't even know if I'm going to do clips in this show, but I think I made the announcement. I was like, we're going to do clips, and then I just listened to the show. I'm like, where do we clip? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm not a good enough editor. I'm like, yeah. Anyway, I mean, my whole thing is like, again, I'm the liberal hippie, but the idea is that I don't equate my suffering with someone else. Because I suffer, I don't want to be punitive. I don't feel that because I had to spend years
because you suffered, others should.
Yeah, and so
which I agree with. That is not a valid argument.
Yeah,
but it is to say that you might still like. It doesn't mean you want others to suffer, but it definitely can mean that you feel slighted.
Yeah, and I understand that if like you hear about, like, we've all done it. Like, you buy something and then a week later it goes on sale, and you're like, damn it, And so I could see, like, I paid my loans off. It was a big process. I paid them off. But like, I could see somebody in the middle of paying these off for their kid or whatever, and they go, oh, you're gonna relieve the debt or release the debt? Like, what? Like, I'm in the middle. I mean, I don't know what to tell those people. That's their feelings. I don't know how they can. My thing is, like, because I paid it off and it was a horrible process, and I know the financial burden it took on me for years. I mean, I had to become a charity case to get an MRI because I was paying loan. Like, it's a terrible situation. So my thing is like, hey, if you don't have to experience that, don't. Like, look at this as a gift. Like, my wife and I just got a tax return.
It is a gift.
My wife and I got a tax return, and we got more than we thought. And we just looked at it. It was like, let's just take this moment, and it's a gift, and
right.
and I
kind of. They're giving you back money you paid them.
No,
they've been holding on to and earning interest.
But I mean, that's just the way we're looking at it, because we weren't expecting it. We were trying to do the napkin math and go, hey, I think we're going to pay. And the tax agent even said, if this went another way, you'd owe $10,000, and it went the other way. But my thing is like, I don't want people, like, whenever I hear the stories of, it's mostly conservatives that are mad at this, and I've seen them at rallies when this was coming up. They'd be like, how, what about my daughter who had to work 2 jobs through college, to pay her loans? And it's like, I don't want her to do that. I want her to focus on school and then maybe have a day off where she could go see her family and do laundry, or go to a movie and see her friend. Like, I want her to be like, I want her to focus. Like, to me, I look at this as like, it's all additive and it improves your life. So if it improves your life, like, yes, it sucks that I had to pay my loans off. Like, I just don't want people to be, like, I had some medical debt a while ago, and years ago, I had to, you suspend it for like 3 months. You can forbearance. I had to do that. And I just don't want people to go I don't want people to have to do that. I want them to have.
Except this forgiveness is a one-time thing. You're forgiving people who are already there. You're not getting rid of student loans in the future. You're not absolving the loan process. You're not changing any of the procedures, right? Like, this will just happen again.
Right.
This is a flagrant and obvious vote buy.
Yeah, that part I totally agree with. Like, you said the loans weren't predatory. It's true. But I'll have you know, Avin,
the majority of them aren't. There are definitely predatory lenders out there, and it's probably more than it should be.
Was Sallie Mae one of the ones that got brought up in the...
I mean, Sallie Mae is one of the biggest lenders in the country. It's the servicing companies that are active. Sallie Mae is the servicing country, right?
Anyway,
company.
It's
the people underneath Sallie Mae that are actually selling the loans, where you end up with the front end people being predatory, not sharing information, discouraging people from reading the clauses. dismissing concerns. People are like, well, like, what if I don't get a job afterwards? You'll
And
get a job.
and I
You're studying basket weaving. Like, how could you not get employed?
funny, Evan, that you brought that up. My father always made fun of me when I went to college. He goes, "What are you going to take? Underwater basket weaving?" Like that was what you just said, basket
It's an
weaving.
old joke.
I know. I was like, "What? What? No." I
It's
mean,
been around for a long time.
I was like, I'd probably take that class to be like, "What are we doing here?" I want to see what
Nowadays, you could probably actually make money on Etsy with it.
I could probably go to Evergreen and learn how. Anyway, my my whole thing is that I totally agree it's a vote by, right? And the process needs to change. Now, you and I both been to college. We were both young. You signed a lot of paperwork, and
Yeah.
I was actually I was a little older. I think I was 19 or 20 when I went to college. Probably 19 when I signed the paperwork. 20. Anyway, you ain't reading that when you're 19. You ain't reading the fine print. And you find out. To me, it was like you and I always talk about buying a home. The first time you buy a home, like you know a little bit more because you know about real estate and you've been in it a while. I
Yeah.
didn't know any of that. Obviously, now that
Nope.
now that I've had my first home and we want to move into we want to start looking for another home this year.
Mhm.
There's a lot different questions I would ask, of course, going into it now.
Oh,
And
heck yeah.
and with loans with college, you unless you go back to college and take more loans, there's a lot you don't know about because you're 19 signing paperwork. Now, I'm not saying like I had really good financial service people in the offices of the college I was in. I had one or two that were like, "Hey, let me help you with this. You're going to get this money, sign this. Don't take that loan, take this loan." But who
Mhm.
has those in those colleges, that kind of guidance when you're young? Maybe your parents. Maybe your parents are really good at that stuff and they'll read it over and go,
In
"You're
theory, they
not."
should be. But here's the thing, Joe. Again, I go back to my other point though. If student loans weren't actually protected the way they are from bankruptcy, like you can't file bankruptcy on student
Yeah,
loans.
which is crap.
If we just changed the rule there, banks would get one hell of a lot more careful about how they lend money to students.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of people, even in the conservative circles, brought up. And I believe as a progressive too, like, hey, you can do this, but like, we need to change the system, right? We don't need to just put a band aid on it. So you're putting a band aid on it for now, but like you said, it'll come back. And I think
Mhm.
that's a big problem of, well, we're not going to do anything to these institutions.
It's a vote buy.
Yeah.
It's a flagrant, obvious, open vote buy, and people 100% willing to take advantage of that. I'll take the money. Here's the other problem I have with it, and this it's a add-on effect. It's one of those downstream things you don't think about.
Right.
We don't need any more money injected into our system.
Yeah.
We already have way too much inflation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, Jerome Powell just talked about that. He's like, man, these insurance rates are killing us, you know? Um,
We are spending more money than we can possibly ever pay the debt on as a country. And while it might feel good to you as an individual in the moment, the add-on effect in the future is going to be far worse. We're
yeah.
debasing our currency at record rates. RFK has come out and said it openly, which I'm like, cool, a politician actually being open. Inflation is a tax on the poor. It is the worst tax on the poor because poor don't own assets.
Yeah.
When inflation happens, assets inflate with inflation, usually at the same rate or higher. But when you're broke, you can't afford to own assets. And so all that happens is your money is worth less. It doesn't go as far.
Yeah. I mean,
And we're all feeling it.
and I mean, like this political article points out, like these safety nets that lifted people out of poverty and helped them, if they all go away, that's because what I think's funny is I listen to Pod Save America. It's three or four guys that used to work for the Obama administration.
Mhm.
Being charitable, it's like, well, listen, you could say what you want about them, their politics, but like they ran a campaign, they won a campaign, they know how to read polls. They know Biden, so they're like, hey, I like Biden, but why is he doing this or why isn't he doing that or he should be doing this? And they're like, why aren't they keep talking in their show? It's so strange to me. Of course, you know, they obviously have money and they're doing well, their whole podcast, whatever. The thing is, it's like they're always like, I just don't understand. Like all these numbers are moving in a good way. You know, unemployment's down and like jobs good and stuff. But then you start getting to like wage growth isn't growing. That's one of those charts in one of the other articles I sent you of like
I
real
mean, we
wage.
had a big spike in the last couple of years on wage growth. Some of the biggest wage growth that's happened in the last like 20 or 30 years. It just wasn't as fast as inflation.
Right. And like, you know, and it's a thing of like, okay, guys, for the Pod Save America people, you know, I'm not calling it out. I'm just saying like one, your actual wage hasn't been growing with inflation. And two, you know, like you said, we don't own assets. If you're poor, you own, you know, you just have cash, right? So like these social safety nets go away, you're paying more. Oh, your wage isn't going up. So you can, you know, numbers are one thing that you can say that this is all going in a positive trend. But if people, you know, they can't stretch their dollar, you know, I'm kind of,
Right.
I'm still blown away when I go to the store and I'm like, I thought we fixed the egg thing, but I'm buying eggs and they're still really expensive. Why are eggs so much? It's
Or shrinkflation, right? Like companies aren't increasing prices; they're just giving
hey,
you a little bit less.
I'll give Biden that. He did call that out of the state union. That is a positive thing where he's like, it was a joke about the Snickers bar of like, there's less. It's like, there is. Call it out, Biden. I don't care if it sounded like you were tired, but yeah, call it out. Like, shrinkflation is a thing. I hate it when I open a bag of chips and there's a quarter of a bag in there when you're like, why are they selling me air, salted air? Anyway, um, yeah, I think the social safety programs that are going to are affecting people way more than unemployment and all that kind of stuff. Of like, yeah, we got jobs, but they're not. Sean Fain, the head of the UAW, was actually in front of Congress, Senate. Anyway, he was talking to Bernie Sanders, uh, and he said, this whole idea of um, wages and stuff is false because he just went on this big tangent. And then he also talked about what your work day is like as a union worker, and how your day goes, and like how this affects you over the years, and how if you're not making enough money, that's why more and more people are getting fed up with, well, you can take the job for $12 an hour. It's like he said COVID, in his speech. Sean Fain was like, COVID was a wake up call. It's like, how long? And I think a lot of people did think that, like, there's a lot of remote jobs out there now, and companies. I mean, you've been on Game with Grief. We talk about that. A lot of companies are like, you have to come in, and a lot of people are like, do I? Like, I've been doing my job for 3 years at home, and we shipped a game. We did the thing, or some companies
We hit
aren't.
our goal, we grew as a company,
Yeah. So why are
right?
you making me come in? And it's that kind of stuff of like, I think COVID was a
And
wake up.
humorously, that's a way where you actually people that can do that, you're putting money back in their pocket because they're not having to drive or commute,
Oh
which
yeah,
actually is helpful. Or maybe they're able to get rid of daycare on a kid or
right.
one of their kids or a couple of their kids, right? Putting money back in their pocket, actually being able to save. The unfortunate thing there too, though, is those remote jobs are typically white collar jobs, and again, it doesn't really help the poorer working class people that work in service industries, manufacturing industries, right? Like you have
Oh
to
yeah.
go in to manufacture a thing. You
No,
have
I
to
know.
go in to provide a service.
I know. I've gone into our office and I see the notes going, I'm working from home today. I'm like, oh man, must be nice. Like, I actually have to
Right.
climb under the cabinet, but that's fine. Like, do the work.
But like when you're my wife and you're a bookkeeper, or
Yeah.
your wife and you're doing planning, coordinating, billing kind of work,
Hmm.
um, right? Scheduling. I don't need to be in the office for that.
Well,
Why are you making me come into the office?
yeah, they
I can do
were,
that from anywhere.
they
I just
were,
need a phone and internet.
yeah, they were doing it to my wife for a while, and then they started hiring people from out of state, and then they kind of like, well, we can't really tell. They were kind of benevolent about it. They're like, well, we can't tell our local employees that they can't work from home when we're literally hiring people from Texas and we're in
Hmm.
Washington State. I guess everybody can
Hmm.
work from home, and they gave people the option. So
Right.
and some people do need that structure. I think we've talked about it before. Like, some people do need to go in every day and have a 9 to 5 and the structure, because other people just will check.
Hey, I benefit from going into the office. It's good for my mental health.
Yeah,
I hate the commute. I hate the commute. It's
yeah.
so bad.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing my wife, when she commuted to Seattle, we were just talking about the time you blow. And when I'm at work too, I've talked to my boss about it. Like, hey, I know I'm leaving. I get to the job site like right when they open, and I'm leaving kind of like 1 or so because I come from north to south. And I was like, if I stay later, you're really not getting any more production out of me except maybe 30 to 45 minutes, but I'm saving 2 hours on the road because I miss traffic. So, like, is that okay for you? And she's like, that's fine. Like, you have to punch in and out. We can see you with ADP. We know what time you're spending. You give us reports at the end of the day of like, here's what you got done, so we can track what
Mm.
you did. So, like, if there's a problem, we'll text you and be like, hey, we really need you to get X, Y, and Z done before you leave today instead of just X and Y. And it's like, great, okay, cool. I'll do the other thing and then I'll go. And there's days when you go to leave and someone catches me on site and it's like, you're trying to get out of there. Like, I was in Salem, Oregon, and somebody caught me at like 2 in the afternoon,
Hey, you told me this story.
and they were like, hey, and I'm like, can you
So,
look?
like, anyway, we've gone off on some crazy tangent here, right? Like, Biden definitely has some weaknesses. He definitively does have some weaknesses,
Mhm.
right? There's still all the questions about his cognitive ability. While we were sitting here, my wife gave me an update on I think it was a Washington Post, but it might have been a Wall Street Journal article about we asked ChatGPT to analyze Joe Biden's cognitive ability,
Oh
and here's what it
no.
said. And like what what's going on there? It is hurting him. His age is hurting him. We've got policies, the domestic policies that are hurting him. As I mentioned earlier, right, like everything going on with immigration. I think on the left, people are upset with him because he's not allowing more people in a better way, and he's not treating the people that are coming across well. And then on the right, he's like letting too many people in, and right, we're going to get run over, and like he can't win on that one. I don't understand why the Democrats are putting Joe Biden forward, Joe, because he seems like he's hated by everybody, or at least very much not liked by everybody. Like, why is he the one we're putting forward? What are the positives for Joe Biden in your eyes?
I'll tell you this, Avin. I think I know why we're putting Joe Biden up, because we are tired. We're not as tired as Joe Biden, but we are tired. No, I think before everything started to roll, it was like, okay. I mean, you and I have talked many times that Biden was, um, he was a placeholder candidate or placeholder president of like, okay, bring the temperature down a bit, let's rebuild. And I think what happened was, I believe, and you can correct me being on the other side of the aisle, I thought maybe Trump maybe wouldn't, I don't know if he'd go to jail. I don't know what would happen with Trump, but he just wouldn't be an issue. So then it's like, well, we don't have to worry about Trump. We'll go through this normal process. We'll pick a Democratic nominee. It's not going to be Biden. He's too old, like he's just a placeholder. And then Trump's not in the picture. You get RFK Jr. I'm just pulling someone out of a hat. You get Ron DeSantis. Boom. Okay, well, who could beat Ron DeSantis? Well, I'm just going to pull a name at Gavin Newsom. You have him. I think that whatever. You have these two guys. Okay, it's a race again. Who are we excited about? Everybody, whatever. I'm skipping past the who gets whittled down and all that. It's those two guys. Great. We're excited again or not excited. You and I are still doing the pod in the the multiverse of like, what do we think about these two guys? Blah blah blah. But I think right now it's like, the one thing I'll say for Biden is he did beat Trump. And, there is this weird calculus I've seen on the back end with polls saying he could do it again. And so people are like, I'm not excited. He's not my guy, especially now after what's been going on. We talked about in the beginning about Gaza, but he's beaten Trump. So maybe he could do it again. Trump, we'll talk about it next episode, but he's got his own problems. Several, 91.
Couple.
Okay, I know we're going to talk about Trump next.
Not 91 anymore. They dropped a few.
I did hear that's a draft though, so they're going to go back and redo charges. So he might be at 89 when we're all done, or they dropped 4. He may get 2 more. The most depressing thing I've seen lately with Trump doesn't have to do with his politics. It has to do, obviously, there's always jokes about how he treats his family or they treat him. And there was actually a video of him at an event, I think in Mar-a-Lago or Florida. He was at a MMA fight or something, and he's shaking hands. He's doing the shaking hand. He run for president, right? He's shaking hands with people. His Ivanka and Jared were there, and they were with, their kid, his grandson. He comes over, he shakes Ivanka's hand, he says hi to Jared, and he walks past his grandson. And it was actually very sad. And it just they shot a picture of Ivanka afterwards where she was pretty much giving him the cold shoulder because she's like, you'll come over and say hi to me, but you're not going to say hi to your grandson. To me, that made me more sad than Trump's charges almost of like, oh, this is just how he treats family. So all those jokes they make about his family, it's like there's video evidence that whatever. Anyway, that'll be next month. We could do that next month. But yeah, I mean, like I said, Biden's not... It's just this thing of like, well, he's not our guy, but he could beat Trump. He did it before, so I guess he's gonna try to do it again. And
what, they don't have anyone that like more likely to? I mean, from a name recognition standpoint, there really is no one else in the Democratic Party that has the name recognition that can do it. Right? And wouldn't do it. The Democratic Party isn't coalescing behind her for obvious reasons.
And just to rip on the Democratic Party, the fact that every time anybody's brought up anybody else, it looks like you actually ran over their puppy in the street. Every pundit I've seen on any left-wing show, they're like, could we run a Dean Phillips or a Marianne Williamson? And they're like, what? No, it's Biden. And you're like, why? He's so old. Like, yeah. I'm not even saying like he isn't with it, or whatever. But like, Jon Stewart obviously is a comedian. He came back to the Daily Show on Mondays. He had a good point. He said like, you keep telling us that he is with it and active and whatever, but what we see is the gaffes. We see him asking for people that are dead. We see him confusing the Prime Minister of Mexico and Israel, or Saudi Arabia. Even now, I'm confusing it, but it was a Middle Eastern prime minister with the Mexican prime minister. That's what we see, you know. And so you can tell us all you want. No, he's vibrant. He's with it. He's whatever. But if we see him screwing up names, looking over here, waiting for a handshake with no one over there,
Stumbling on ramps, struggling on stairs.
yeah, I mean, he tripped over some sandbags. It's great that he makes jokes about his age, but like if we see him being old, we're going to think he's old, right? It's
Mhm.
it's like what was a joke I heard? You know, they basically made the same point I did. As somebody on the left basically said, who are you going to believe? Like all these reports telling us that he's vibrant, or my lying eyes when I see him trip over a sandbag, or, like, no, my eyes and my ears, luckily I have both of them and I can see and hear him, mess up. So it's like, what are we doing? Like, don't try to tell me he's with it when I can see clearly he is not, and like I said earlier, the thing with Gaza, it's like, well, if you're not going to fight for that, something that many people, even in your own party, think is reprehensible, you're just willing to shrug it off. How much more fight do you have in you for Ukraine or
I
like
just
whatever?
think he feels like he's doing the right thing. I think that he has a very long-standing history and past of partnering
Mm-hmm.
with Israel and being closely tied to Israel and
Right.
supporting Israel.
Well,
And
he bought the Netanyahu stand, which Netanyahu has openly said this on talk shows, that if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic. Like Benjamin Netanyahu said that on talk shows,
mhm.
and so it's like, so maybe Biden thinks that he believes that if I don't support them with weapons and whatever, then they'll think that not that I'm anti-Semitic, but that I'm not standing with Israel. Um,
that the Anti-Defamation League is going to start standing up against him, and he's
they're
going to lose the Jewish vote too, and right, like there could be that concern going on, but uh, you know, honestly, if he believes what Israel is doing in defending themselves is right, and they have a right to do that, and they have a right to defend themselves, and he doesn't think that it's heavy-handed or disproportionate, he's doing what he thinks is right.
Yeah, I mean,
And
obviously he is, because he would have stopped it, right? I mean, he'd be
right,
the one going. I mean, he is. What you're saying is absolutely true, and I think it is true. Like what you think is true and what is happening, that is true, because he is, through his actions, going. You know, I don't have a
if
red
he thought it
line.
were wrong, he could do the same thing that former presidents have done. He
Yeah,
can call up Netanyahu and say, "You're done."
yeah, wrap it up.
And Netanyahu's going to go, "I'm not done." And he's going to go, "Well, you're not getting any more help from us. So figure it out on your own.
Yeah,
We're going in to help Gaza. We're going in to help the Palestinian people. We're going in to, root out Hamas. If you shoot or kill any of our people, hell will be raised."
I'll also say that I would,
He could do it.
if I would snap my fingers and I was president and I have the ability to do this, I'd say, okay, what we're gonna do is we're condition aid. They'll get money for the Iron Dome, and they'll get like whatever the smallest aid package. They could go through it's where this, and this. Okay, that's good. Iron Dome could, no more missiles, right? And I'd like to see, no matter how much they complained or whatever, I'd like to start a stopwatch or look at a clock or whatever, and to see how long Israel would still push into Gaza, and be like, oh, it took them 12 days to stop, or what, like how long did that take, for them to, because like a lot of people on the left have brought up, now it's not just about the bombing and the actual fighting. It's going to be about starvation and disease. Like they're running out of clean water in Gaza, or they're out of clean water. There's reports of people eating animal feed because they have no food. There's and so those, again, like a lot of people have said on the left, if the fighting was to stop tomorrow, you're going to start hearing about these other issues that are coming up, and they're going to be in the news for months. So, like, I know early on, you and I talked several episodes ago, I think 35 or 36, about people may forget in November what is going on, but I think the longer this stretches, I mean, we both didn't know that it was going to stretch on this long, but the longer it stretches on and the longer you hear these stories, it's like, well, you know what I mean? Like, it's going to be an issue, And I'm trying to think of the last. I had one other article really quickly. What was I? So it was I got it right here. It was the social safety net. It was that, and then the metrics. I think the one that I thought was really interesting out of the metrics. By the way, I think it showed job growth was like absolutely cratered in 2020, because obviously
Yep.
that was
COVID.
COVID. Household wealth is way up, which is great. Um, but inequality is widening, so that's bad.
Credit card debt is skyrocketing.
Yeah.
I think we might have broken a record for the most amount of credit card debt held by
Yeah,
Americans.
I heard that. I heard that. I don't know. Well, what do you? I mean, obviously, you're not going to vote for Biden or anything, Evan. I mean, do you like? Nobody's going to make a prediction. I mean, do you think he will beat Trump and still win, even with all this like looming?
I I don't know, right? Like originally, I would have been in the position that there's no way in the world that Trump's going to win, right? There's too much of the traditional Republicans that are like, no, I'm not voting for this guy. Like you can't make me.
Yeah.
But more and more, Biden's eroding his own base.
Mm-hmm.
RFK is gaining ground
Mm-hmm.
because people that were supporting Trump for the Q questioning the government, anti-vax, don't trust big pharma kind of people um, might not be okay with Trump's legal stuff, but would more likely realign with RFK. I the other day that he's don't count him out. He's looking to line up to be another Ross Perot.
Right.
Um, and that could also do it, right? Like at this point in time, I think it kind of is anyone's game. If Trump actually gets indicted, I think it's very unlikely he's going to, or not indicted. If Trump actually gets convicted on any of the charges against him,
Yeah, he's already been
that
indicted several times.
right,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
If Trump actually gets convicted on any of the charges brought against him, I think the likelihood of his winning the election goes down dramatically because I think enough people recognize that these are jury trials. What happened with the fraud case wasn't a jury trial, but all of the rest of them are going to be. And Trump's attorneys have a say on who gets to actually be a juror.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if a jury convicts him of these crimes, you can no longer cry witch hunt. I mean, you can cry it, but you're much, much, much weaker.
Yeah. I'm really it'll be very interesting to see what happens. I think what I like is, I'll say this today and we're running out of time, but what I will say is that um you know, early on, not even early on, a few weeks ago, there was this idea of like, well, who are people voting for? They're voting for Cornell West or they're voting for Marianne Williamson. Is that a protest vote, or do people really care about them as much, or are they just doing it because they don't like Biden? And I think with the
Mm.
uncommitted, because it's been kind of a word of mouth campaign that has happened in every state so far, to me that is a clear, like you said, it's a protest vote and it's a clear vote, right? Now, the other
Mm.
votes for Marianne Williamson or Dean Phillips in those categories, we don't know if they're just like, well, I don't want to be uncommitted, but I'll vote for Dean Phillips. Maybe a percentage of those are protest votes, but I think this will be the thing. You always hear exit polls when everything ends. Why did you vote this way? Why did you vote that way? And people will, out of the people they talk to, they will say why. And I think with this, it'll be fascinating with the uncommitted uh, tab you can click to say this is why these people voted this way, and we know 100% that's why they did it. So there's no question of, well, I was really voting against Biden, but I was voting for Dean Phillips or whatever.
Right.
Why this happens. So this, like you said, it's great for people, and I believe it. It's great for people to show how they feel, to use their vote as a protest vote. They're putting their money where their mouth is, basically, and saying this is how I feel. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't think of another movement. I mean, I'd have to do some research, but for the elections in my lifetime, I can't think of one thing that's been like, this is the one issue. I mean, abortion we thought was a big deal, but even the liberals push back on that because they're like, well, you had the years to codify it into law. So why didn't you do that? And they got mad at that. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm very interested to see what happens this election. And, you know, I'm going to vote uncommitted. And if Trump gets elected, I'm not going to sit here and go, man, you know what? I'm going to be as worried as everybody else if whatever Trump tries to do, he tries to do. But, you know, Biden had moments, he had chances to change course and whatever. So I'm just going to be very interested to see, uh, the result of all this. And hopefully we'll stop talking about these two men for so long. If,
I mean, we'll be talking about one of them because one of them will be president,
yeah, yeah, maybe.
unless one of them dies or goes to jail.
Yeah, I mean that could happen. So, Evan, before we leave, is there anything you want to plug? I know you mentioned, my your agent guide, but is there any? Are you doing videos again? Is there anything else you want to plug? Uh, here?
Uh, I haven't made any videos. I do intend on making videos in the future again. Obviously, what's up there, a lot of it is still relevant. Some of it was for the time, but a lot of the information is still useful. So if you
Yep,
have questions about real estate,
yep, yep, yep.
buying or selling homes, how to pick a real estate agent, I would
Mm-hmm.
totally recommend checking out your agent guide on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Other than that, occasionally I am a guest on Joe's other podcast, The Grief of Politics. This is our podcast. That is his, but
My
or
gaming with
not Grief of
grief.
Politics, Gaming with Grief.
You did the thing I did
I named
last.
this podcast.
Yeah, you
I'm a
did.
guest on my own podcast.
You did the thing. You did the thing that I did last episode, where you're like, you just said the same thing over again. Yeah. Hopefully, on that podcast, I'll have you on for a good reason. You know,
Not likely. It's Gaming with Grief, Joe.
that's true.
It doesn't have a positive spin.
That's right. So you can't ever get upset at me if I'm like another depressing topic. You're like, well, it is in the title. I guess. I guess we'll have to do.
We're not doing the joy of gaming.
Yeah. Oh, like I said, I think I made that joke. I was like, that should be the spin-off show where we just talk about the good stuff that's happening in gaming. No, I mean, your videos, I've said it before, I'll say it again, they were informational. They did help me out. And I still get feeds from Facebook. I don't know if it's an aggregate you pull from or whatever, but I do click on those occasionally to read, if it catches my fancy. So you could even follow that on Facebook and get updates.
Facebook, Instagram, your agent guide as well. And the information I'm putting out there, it's a service. It provides just kind of general news and information on the industry, basic tips on what's going on in real estate in general. We're recording this on March 16th, 2024. In the last couple of days, there's been a big, huge, giant lawsuit that was settled by the National Association of Realtors that has really had a lot of news coverage going on.
Yeah.
And will probably dramatically change real estate in the United States, but probably not in the way that a lot of news media is painting it to be. I don't think it's the big, huge.
Well, because of everything that's happened,
commissions are over that you're reading, because it's just not.
Well, yeah, we may have to talk about that because we haven't talked about real estate in a while, and there's been a lot popping off with real estate. We may have to do like a real estate 2024 episode, maybe after the election though, because let me tell you, this year is on fire, Avin.
It is a busy news year. If you're in the news media,
yeah,
it is a good year to make money.
Yeah.
If you are in the alternate news media,
great
it is
year.
a good year to make
great
money.
Year.
We aren't making money on our podcast.
No,
but,
we're not.
We're just here to have these conversations in a recorded way so other people can listen to us and be like, "You're schmucks."
Wow, you guys really don't fight that much. No, we probably should. Maybe we should have somebody offensive on. No, I'm kidding. Well, I mean, yeah, I haven't plugged the Gaming with Grief. If you like tabletop role-playing games, I also have a podcast for that too. You can subscribe to that. Yeah, I think that's it. Again, this is an election year, so instead of doing normal topics, we're kind of trying to keep abreast of what's happening with election news. And as you've seen over the past couple months, it has been a lot. But I think that is it this month, or this episode. I'll talk to everybody next episode.